Has been ordered in southern India after more than 100 Hindu pilgrims were killed in a stampede. Now, it began when a car drove into a crowd of worshippers on a narrow forest path in Kerala. Polls have now closed after a week of voting in South Sudan's referendum on independence. Observers say turnouts of 90% will validate a vote which is widely expected to result in a split with the north. President Omar al-Bashir and the president of southern Sudan are expected to meet in Khartoum in the coming days to discuss post-independence issues. The result is expected in early February. Côte d'Ivoire's First Lady Simone Gbagbo has called for an independent nation at a rally in Abidjan. The wife of incumbent President Laurent Gbagbo said the country must assert its sovereignty. Opposition leader Alassane Ouattara is the internationally recognized winner of the November elections, but Gbagbo has refused to step down. It's celebrating its 10th birthday, but is Wikipedia really a grown-up online reference guide or still experiencing teething problems? That's coming up. Plus a look at why Tunisia's neighbours may be feeling nervous. Stay with us.
Decoding the stories that shape our views.
Those images catapulted the story back into the headlines.
Everything that I thought would be easy was hard, and everything that I thought would be hard was easy.
From mainstream media to consumer-led advertising.
There are other options.
What's at the front line of global media?
This has been reported worldwide.
With a major media angle to it.
Comparing news and challenging views. The Listening Post, at this time on Al Jazeera.
I want to change the world.
She's the dream. We are the arms and legs of that dream.
From the depths of despair and anger, there is forgiveness.
I've had enough of blaming people.
From passion and energy, there is hope.
Let's see how strong we are.
These people are really crazy, believe me.
Documentaries that celebrate the human spirit. Witness, at this time on Al Jazeera.
Hello again, you're watching Al Jazeera. A reminder of our top stories. Russia and energy giant BP have reached a deal worth more than $8 billion. The share swap between Russia's state-owned Rosneft and BP will see both sides start to explore the Russian Arctic continental shelf for oil reserves. In Brazil, helicopters are reaching isolated survivors of the devastating mudslides, but more rain is making relief and rescue work difficult. At least 540 people are confirmed dead, with many more still missing. Speaker of Tunisia's parliament has now taken power less than 24 hours after mass protests forced the president to leave. He says the prime minister is working towards forming a unity government with opposition members. And there have been jailbreaks and riots at least 4 of Tunisia's prisons. A fire swept through one jail, killing more than 50 people. Reports say that one prison director let 1,000 inmates escape. Well, events in Tunisia are being watched closely across the Arab world. Whilst many people have been celebrating, their leaders may be nervously wondering what happens next. Raya Rageh reports from the Egyptian capital, Cairo.
Calls for a revolution. Egyptian activists saluting Tunisia's uprising and wanting one of their own. Gathered outside the Tunisian embassy in Cairo for the second day in a row, they chant, "Down with corruption, down with autocracy, down with dictators."
While it's not clear if these limited protests could gain enough traction to replicate what happened in Tunisia, the sentiment here is clear. Change is coming. Tunisia is the inspiration.
Across the Arab world, activists welcome the downfall of Zain al-Abidine Ben Ali. From Algiers to Amman, discontent is brewing over unemployment, rising food prices and repressive regimes that have repeatedly failed to deliver on promises of reform. The Arab League's Secretary General has described the events as dangerous and of historical consequence.
What happens in Tunisia will affect the rest of the Arab world. Contrary to what is said about the Arab world being in disarray, the Arab community is one. It's a cohesive community. Every nation affects the other. This is why we are all monitoring developments with great interest.
Special interests too, activists say, must be paid by others who've been in power for decades.
If Zine al-Abidine Ben Ali has remained in power for 23 years, there are others who stayed even longer. They are worse than pharaohs, worse than dictators. They think they're immortal. But what happened in Tunisia proves that everything has an end. Every dictator has an end.
Outnumbered and outmaneuvered by security as most protests in Egypt, reality, however, sinks in. A reminder that though many may want change, it may be some time coming. Al Jazeera, Cairo.
Well, there's been a huge reaction online to developments in Tunisia, with many expressing their surprise at the display of people power. Mona El Tahawi is a widely read newspaper columnist, and she wrote, in 29 days, Tunisians' brave protests brought down Ben Ali, dictator of 23 years. First real post-colonial revolution in the Arab world. Others say this uprising does not fit into common misconceptions about the Middle East. Twitter user Majda72 wrote, "Note to the West, this was not an Islamic uprising. Take your Arab world as monolith stereotype and shove it." And finally, many have wondered if the Tunisian scenario could be repeated elsewhere. One writer at the blog for the Egyptian Democratic Students' Union said, "Build up your democratic institutions and export your revolution to neighbouring countries so that the revolution lives in peace and grows in the womb of a free nation, a nation that we have always dreamed of." Sama Shehata is an assistant professor of Arab politics at the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies at Georgetown University and joins us now from Washington, D.C. So I suppose one of the main crucial questions in this story is, will this revolutionary zeal indeed be exported to Tunisia's neighbours?
Yes. Well, first I must congratulate the courageous Tunisian people for their historic achievement. They have become heroes and a model throughout the Arab world. With regard to your question, I think that some of the implications of what's happened in Tunisia are already being seen. There were demonstrations, as your piece indicated, in front of the Tunisian embassy in Cairo, also in Amman, also in Sana'a, Yemen. And there have been demonstrations about similar issues, about rising prices, about corruption, about marginalization of youth and political marginalization generally in Algeria, and in other countries. And leaders are quite concerned about this, and they've reacted in many cases.
But to what extent is the situation in Tunisia different to, say, in Egypt and Yemen? Because Tunisians have long enjoyed very high levels of education, perhaps not enjoyed so much by many in Egypt.
Yes, that's exactly correct. We're talking about a country of 10 or 12 million people in the case of Tunisia versus a country of 83 million people in the case of Egypt. So there are certainly major differences. At the same time, though, for those of us who study the Arab world, Tunisia and the regime of Zine al-Abidine Ben Ali was considered the closest thing to a police state, with little serious opposition. People did not expect this in any way. There's much more organized independent civil society groups, organized political parties to some extent in many other Arab countries. So although there are major differences, this was not to be expected. And I think that one of the key things is how quickly events unfolded, and what that means is how fragile these regimes are at one level. It's true they have massive security forces, but one 20-something-year-old gentleman who took his own life led to this historic event in Tunisia that was completely unforeseen. And similar things could happen in other Arab states. I'm not holding my breath, but nevertheless, people are watching this very, very carefully.
And of course, we've seen very little response from leaders of those Arab states. Should you imagine that they're quite nervous?
Well, there's no question they're quite nervous. We've already seen many interesting things even before the departure of Zain al-Abidine Ben Ali. After things started to get out of hand in Tunisia, we saw the Libyan regime increase subsidies for basic foodstuffs. We saw the Jordanian regime do the same. These are measures that are intended to quell preemptively this type of action taking place in those countries. And we've seen also statements on the part of many of these leaders indicating their awareness of the difficulty of economic life and pledges for political reform. So yes, this is a regional system that is very much connected. And this spark could lead to increased political activity elsewhere.
Now, of course, those very similar measures in Tunisia had absolutely no effect on protesters whatsoever. But if we look a little bit closely at Tunisia, we're seeing events there playing out at extraordinary speeds. What must these interim leaders do now to keep the people happy?
Well, there are a couple of things that need to be taken care of immediately. First, basic security has to be established. And then after that, there have to be very sincere attempts to be inclusive politically. That is, opposition parties have to be brought into the government. Exiles in London and in Paris have to be welcomed back. There has to be some firm commitment to holding free and fair elections with domestic and international monitors in the period of between 45 to 60 days, as the Tunisian constitution stipulates. And there has to be some accounting for the transgressions that the Ben Ali regime has undertaken, in terms of human rights abuses, in terms of corruption, and so on. So this has to be done fairly quickly for, I think, the situation in Tunisia to settle down.
Samir Shehata, thank you very much for your insightful thoughts there on the situation in Tunisia. Now, Lebanon's leading Sunni cleric has warned that the political stalemate in his country could lead to bloodshed, pain and division. Mohammed Rashid Kabani says he wants caretaker Prime Minister Saad Hariri to form a new government as quickly as possible. Hariri's government collapsed on Wednesday after Hezbollah withdrew its support from an already fragile coalition. Syria's Prime Minister Naji al-Otari has arrived in Iraq for a two-day visit. The trip is a major step forward in improving ties between the two countries, which only re-established full diplomatic relations 4 months ago. Syria, which is predominantly Sunni and mainly Shia Iraq, have had rocky relations for several decades. Envoys from the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, have arrived in Tehran for a tour of Iran's nuclear sites. The envoys are from Egypt, Venezuela, Cuba and Syria. But major players China and the European Union declined Iran's invitation. Iran is looking to build support ahead of key nuclear talks in Turkey next week.